TileCast. News, features and analysis brought to you by Diary of a Tile Addict. Hi Joe, well it's good to see you again. Where have you just come back from?
Right, I've been making my near annual pilgrimage to Revestir, the Brazilian tile show held in Sao Paulo, and one of the fixtures on the ceramic tile calendar.
Oh, so how many times have you been before then?
Oh, quite a few. I think the first time I went was about 18 years ago, and I haven't gone every year since, but I've done a good chunk of years, plus obviously a gap recently because of COVID-19.
Oh, showing your age a bit now. So how many other journalists were there? Were you
Right,
good
well,
company?
There were obviously Brazilian journalists, but of overseas journalists, there were rumoured to be 5, me and 3 from South America, plus somebody called Marco from Italy, but none of us actually managed to see Marco the entire time we were there, although he was supposed to be staying at the same hotel.
Oh, okay. Well, hello Marco, if you're out there, just let us know what happened to you because we're concerned. But at any rate, how was the show?
Well, it was different from any other Revestir I've ever been to, but that was because it had moved from the Transamerica Centre to the Sao Paulo Expo, so it's now a show on a grow bag. The previous venue had a daily capacity of around 20,000. The Sao Paulo Expo is about 57,000, and it is big. It's very big. The main hall is somewhere between 1 and 1.5 kilometres long, so it is super huge, and it can accommodate a pretty big tile show.
So is this a natural progression from where it was before the pandemic, or did it just have to move and then it filled the space, do you know?
I think it was that they had run out of space, that there was a limit to how far they could take the show, but my guess is that was a decision made pre-pandemic, and now it would have probably fitted quite well in the old one, but going forward it'll need the new space, because largely it was Brazilian exhibitors this time, whereas in the past there's been a pretty good representation of big factories, particularly from Europe, but also from emerging nations like China, India, whatever.
Oh, right, so they might come back in future shows, you think?
Well, I'd think so. I mean, essentially any tile show in the world at the moment has very little Chinese representation because of the strict lockdown then, and although that's been lifted, it's going to take a while for all the commercial activities to kick up again, I think.
So who was attending then, apart from you journalists?
Right, well, it's essentially about 40% architects and interior designers, about 30% distributors and retailers, about 10% developers and contractors, and then there's a large part of about 20% of others. And I suspect that a lot of those are just interested house owners and just people who like to go to the interior design show.
So there weren't many foreign exhibitors this year, so who was buying and selling at the show?
Right, well, there never are a vast number of foreign exhibitors or visitors. This year I was told there were around 1,000 foreign visitors, and quite a few of them had been specifically invited. But they were supposed to be drawn from 55 countries, but the largest element, without any doubt, would have come from South and Central America, because that is really where the Brazilian market lies. Brazil exports somewhere in the region of $490 million worth of tiles a year, and of that 51% or so is to South America, 25% to North America, and 20% to Central America. So
Right.
If you put all those sums together, it doesn't leave much for anywhere else. Europe, for instance, only accounts for about 2% of Brazil's
So
tile
it's a
export.
show for the Americas, really, at the moment, at any rate.
I think that is what it is. I'm not sure that's what it aspires to be, but, it's fine. South America is a very big place, and a successful show there, you're still talking about a huge audience. I mean, Brazil alone is 200 million plus.
Yeah.
But I think they would like it to be a big international reference point. But at the moment, it's fair to say it probably isn't.
Right. So, and where's Brazil at in terms of designs?
Right. Well, I would say that since I've been going there, Brazil is beginning to look more and more like everywhere else in terms of tile designs. When I first went there, as I say, 18 years ago, it had a distinctly Brazilian feel. Some of the themes and the patterns and textures were Brazilian. For instance, the sort of stuff that dealt with rainforest decors, that sort of thing. And there were quite a lot of natural materials based on indigenous materials in Brazil, like bamboo or some of the exotic hardwoods. Well, now, if you could take the name off each of the stands and you'd say to somebody, where is this tile company from? And not that many, you would immediately go, oh, they're Brazilian. There are one or two. There are companies like Manufatti and Nina Martinelli that are distinctly Brazilian. But that's because they're doing things that really you only see in Brazil, like Cagobo, or they're using certain colours or materials that I think the well-trained eye would tell you are Brazilian. But if you went onto Portobello's stand or Eliani's stand or Portinari's stand or Elizabeth stand, you could be on any of the big European factories.
You'd better backtrack. Cagobo's, explain.
Cagobo's, right. The pierced three-dimensional screens that allow light and air through, which are distinctly Brazilian. If you ever look on Diary of a Tile Addict, you'll see I've written quite extensively about these pieces because I love them. And they are something I first saw in Brazil, and they are still something that is a distinctive trademark, really, of the Brazilian tile show. This year there were only three stands that had them, Manufatti, Portinari and Portobello, but there were some interesting ones. There was one which incorporated quite a lot of reclaimed mussel shell.
Wow.
And then there were some simple glazed ones. Manufatti had the best display, really beautiful screens with different shapes, and as you walk past them you get the kind of distorted view through them. They're wonderful things.
There was a bit of that at Chairsai, wasn't there? I mean, that seemed to be a fairly new thing at Chairsai, a sort of three-dimensional tile structure that was designed as a room divider or a...
Yep, it's coming. I've seen them at the Surface Design Show in London. I've seen them at Clerkenwell Design Week. But if I'm going to claim anything, I have been singing the praise of these things for quite a few years now, and it's taken a long time for anybody to bring them to Europe. There is now one company in London that's doing it. But I think with the current dominant trend for indoor-outdoor living, Cagobo have got a huge role to play. Plus you can have them as half-height screens indoors. Because they're pierced, they're not so dominant. And they're beautiful. So
it's fair to say then that possibly the Brazilian show in the past has actually influenced in Europe.
I suspect so. There's no doubt that the top Brazilian factories, and I would have to single out Portobello here. If you were serious about the tile industry, you really are going to have to pay close attention to what this factory is doing, because they are so ambitious. They're so good at investing in design, investing in manufacturing, production, technology. But yeah, I've always found that the smaller factories that you see at Revestir have some fascinating product. A lot of it is never exported, but you can always export the ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you say it's beginning to look a bit more like a European show as well, maybe it's going both ways.
It is. There are still noticeable differences. I would say that the large trends are the same. There's a lot of white marble effects. There are a lot of beige stone effects, so the sort of limestone, lots of cement effects. This year there were far fewer wood effect tiles at Brazil than there have been in the past. That was quite interesting. And there are a lot more glossy tiles than you would probably see in a European or a North American show now. But, that's maybe just the trend over there.
And favourites? What stood out for you apart from the Cagobos?
Well, the thing that stood out for me probably were some of the 1970s inspired tiles. So curved patterns, brown on brown tones. They're kind of, playful throwbacks, and that was a dominant theme. There were some other things, some of the colours, blue and particularly green marbles, which, we were seeing that in shows like Chairsai and Sevisama, but it was underlined, I think, at Revestir. I would say they were the main differences. And obviously, because you're tending to see the big factories displaying there, Brazil has got about 60 large-scale manufacturers, but they are largely into large format tiles. So you were seeing that plus a few slab people. And really, I think there was only one big European factory there, which was the Iris Group, which had FMG and Revestir and some of their other brands. But it was, large formats and medium-sized formats generally from the big factories.
And going on around the show, what's a Brazilian show like to go to?
Right. I think there are, if I count up, three kind of distinguishing features. One is the mix of people. It may just be me, but it always seems there is a lot closer balance between male and female attendees at Brazil. So conspicuously more women attending the show. And I would say the audience is younger than the average tile show in Europe. And they do the talks. They have a sort of series of architectural talks linked to the show. And that is very well attended and it attracts some really big names. So the likes of Ron Arad have spoken there and others. And it's very international. And I always find that interesting. In a show that is maybe quite South American, the speakers are from Japan, China, Europe, North America, pretty much anywhere. And they've had some really big names. I mean, other people who are Tile Addict will know I really like Patricia Coiler has spoken there. They get some really top names. Oscar Niemeyer. They've had some real top architects there.
So it sounds like quite an outward-looking event.
It is, and maybe the most distinguishing feature that shows this is the prevalence of social media at the show. And you think, what do you mean by that? Is that
that was said like an old bloke saying social media.
Yeah, well, hello, old bloke talking. No, what I found it fascinating because not only are there loads of people there who are clearly there to post up selfies and videos and other things, and they are dressed for the part and they in pairs, and it's nearly all women doing this, but a lot of the stands are playing balls too, so they have specific areas that are designed to be sat in and photographed on. And this show took it to quite extremes. There was a Barbie car you could sit in and have your picture taken as a Barbie, but next door there was a box, so you could actually be the Barbie doll in a box across the hall.
And there were Ken?
Ken wasn't really at the races, I'm afraid. Across the hall, and then there was Barbie's bedroom, Barbie's kitchen, Barbie's bathroom. Okay,
well, I'm kind of hoping this isn't a forthcoming trend, but
Well, I think the other areas there will be. I mean, brands like Elizabeth, whose stand was absolutely enormous, by the way. They spanned 3 aisles of this show, and each one had a huge seat with a ceramic logo above the top of it, and it was designed so that people could pose in it and have their photograph taken and project the brand around the world. But there were so many other stands. The key thing seemed to be you've got a fancy seat, like suspended chair or an enormous sofa, and you encourage people to come to
the brand names were loomed large, presumably. Was it not just good marketing?
It wasn't as... I thought at first, yes, this is just purely so that people will be photographed in front of the brand. And actually, though, as I went around the show recording all of these things, not many of them actually did have the brand that visible, except, of course, Revestir hadn't missed out on this. It had huge 3D logos both at the main entrance outside and inside, and all day people were posing by this and having their photograph taken. And it was hilarious because they didn't just pose once, they had a whole series of different poses, sitting, standing, fingers on chins, gurning, and it was just watching the repertoire go through them was hilarious.
For an old bloke.
I think it'd be hilarious for anybody. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, no, it's always good to be outside looking in there in my eyes, but still. Okay, so, it sounds like it's youthful on many levels, this show, and, a bit of a trendsetter, and it probably always has been, the sound of it.
It is interesting on a lot of levels. I would say that probably if you were running a big European tile shop, you're not going to go there to find a whole load of products to stock, because the distance is still probably prohibitive. But if you want to experience something different, get some ideas about how a different culture demonstrates tiles, both the commonalities and the differences, it's a great show. It is fun. It's a fun event. You can go to some very interesting talks, and you'll see some brands that you just don't get to see if you go to Cersei or Sevesama or Coverings.
So pretty good for your interior designers and your specifiers wanting to look a little bit beyond.
I think it would. There are some issues with, if you're like me, not a Portuguese speaker, because a lot of the people there don't speak very good English, and certainly to my ears, Portuguese is very difficult to understand. Even when you're looking at the words and somebody's speaking to them, I mean, I just find a huge disconnect. So there is a slight element of that, and it is a South American show catering largely for Brazilians. So, why should they cater for people from the UK? But you still get a lot out of it. The visual element of it, the sort of slight party atmosphere that's there, you can't help but appreciate. And it was rammed. It was supposed to attract 60,000 over the 4 days. Well, I spoke to Andre Campagna, who's the head of marketing for the show, on the second day, and they had over 30,000 through on that day alone. And he said he had turned off the online registration, not because the venue couldn't cope, but he was just worried about clogging up all the roads in the vicinity if he attracted too many people there.
Surely not. You can't be worried about attracting too many people to a show.
Well, that's what he told me. And it's true, but I mean, this is also true of Bologna and quite a few other exhibition centres, is if it's a weakness of both this and the previous venue, is that they are just not well served by public transport. So basically everybody has to drive to it. And that means either driving in their own car or in an incredible number of minibuses that keep the whole thing kind of serviced for people. And because most people are staying in the centre of Sao Paulo, which is quite a decent drive away, it does clog up the roads, and frankly Sao Paulo's roads don't need any help to be clogged up, because if there's the one thing I don't like about the place is there are just staggering numbers of cars and particularly motorbikes on the roads, and it feels very, very dangerous.
So they don't have some kind of park and ride scheme, which would seem like an obvious solution to that.
Well, the obvious solution would be to have a big train station there and the train's just arriving and picking people off. But no, they don't, and they didn't at the previous one. And it is a very car-centric kind of city, it seems to me. I mean, yes, it has bus systems, but no, I would say most people arriving there were driving there themselves or coming on buses from the stations, because most of the buses that were serving people as they left the show were heading for train stations in town.
So would you recommend going if you were from Europe or from North America or Asia? Would you think it's worth a trip just for a different taste of stuff?
Well, I mean, the fact that I've been going there for 18 years, you can probably guess the answer. I think it is. I wouldn't say go there every year, and I wouldn't say go there with a view to doing it your only buying trip of the year or your only evaluation of trends or whatever. But if you once every X number of years to get a sense of something different, to experience a very vibrant culture, one that takes design very seriously but has a slightly different take on it than in Europe, it's absolutely worth it. And some of the brands are truly world class. I mean, I've obviously already mentioned Portobello, but Portinari, Eliani, Elizabeth are huge brands. Plus you see Pamessa and Roca have got big Brazilian operations and they're exhibiting. And then there's some of the biggest factories in the world, like Insepa and stuff, will be there as well. It is surprising that there weren't big Mexican manufacturers exhibiting there, and maybe that's because they're keeping their powder dry for coverings in a few weeks. So it was largely Brazilian fare, but I don't think that's a problem.
Well, of course, the good news is that if other people can't manage to get there and you can, then you can tell them all about it. So I think there's going to be more information up, and I think you've already done one article on Diary of a Tile Addict, haven't you? And there's a bit more to come.
One incidental fact which rather tickled me, the hotel I was staying at, along with the other 3 international journalists who actually were from Argentina, Colombia and Paraguay, was that this is also where a lot of the big international buyers who had been invited by the show were staying, and they were largely from South America. And I don't know if anybody's seen the Spanish TV series called Money Heist or something de Papel.
La Casa de Papel, I think.
La Casa de
Not
Papel.
that my Spanish is any good.
Yeah,
but
La Casa de Papel.
Papel,
where
yes.
the main...
Sorry, all Spanish speakers, we don't speak Spanish. Leave that to Hannah, she does.
Okay, so we take it from La Casa de Papel, where the main characters are named after worldwide cities. The people who were staying at the hotel with me had adopted the names, so we were sitting having a drink after the show one night, and they said, "Oh, here comes Colombia." And then it was, "Oh, hello, Paraguay." And they were basically all talking about each other as... by their country names. I was, of course, Inglaterra, although they sometimes attempted to call me Joe, which is hilarious. because it came out as something like enjoy. But after a while, I realised that they were talking to me, so that was good. But yeah, it was just, and also really, really nice people. And I was interested to find that the guy from Panama had also been at Sevisama 2 weeks ago. So, serious tile buyers, and they were having a really good time. And, clearly they are regulars. They love the show. So the small numbers of overseas foreign visitors didn't mean that there weren't some really high-class ones there. And probably if you're an exhibitor, that's all you need. I mean, 1,000 quality buyers is plenty.
Yeah, awesome. Top-notch journalists to tell everyone else about it that couldn't go. So that's cool.
Yeah. And that was the strange thing with those 3 interior design magazines from South America and Diary of a Tile Addict, and that was job done, really. I think from them, from the press point of view.
Yeah. No, well, that's brilliant, Joe. Thanks for that. Hope you enjoyed listening, everybody, from wherever you are in the world. Do let us know what you think of the show.
And by the by, tomorrow off to Portugal to go on a tour of tile factories there.
You're just showing off now.
I am just showing off, but keep listening. You never know.
Okay. See you next week, Joe.
You've been listening to TileCast, produced by Diary of a Tile Addict. To ensure you don't miss any future episodes, don't forget to follow us. You can also find show notes and receive updates on news feeds, articles, podcasts and videos direct to your inbox by subscribing to the diaryofatile-addict.com website. Get the inside track at Diary of a Tile Addict.